Welcome to the 28th episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. I'm your host, James Herrick, and today we're going to be taking a look at UFC Fight Night, Kelvin Gastelum versus Robert Whittaker. And then afterwards, we're going to be talking about the Jake Paul versus Ben Askren fight, but I'm not going to go in depth on that. I just have a couple of quick things I want to say. So if you're looking for a big breakdown on Ben Askren versus Jake Paul, this is not the place to be. I'm going to give a couple of general thoughts about that. And we didn't really have much for other news in the UFC, so we don't have anything for that. And we're going to end off by discussing UFC 261, Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. We also have two other title fights on that card, so we're going to be discussing that. And overall, it should be a relatively short podcast this week. I mean, there isn't too much to talk about, so I'm not gonna find, uninteresting things to talk about. We're just going to talk about the important stuff here. And before we get started, make sure you go and follow my other social medias. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. And if not, make sure to like. And go follow me on Twitter and TikTok. I'm very interactive on both of those platforms. So if you ever have a question, that is the place to reach me, Twitter or TikTok. I post videos on TikTok and I post a lot of MMA-related content on Twitter. So if you like this podcast, you should be interested in those. And that is all I have to say for that. And let's get started. So Robert Whittaker's performance against Kelvin Gastelum was a great performance, and he proved once again that he is the best 185-pounder on the planet that is not named Israel Adesanya, and he may be better than Izzy, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves here. But in this fight, he was very diverse, and he didn't just rely on his striking. He also used a great sense of wrestling in this fight. He got a takedown on Kelvin Gastelum, and he controlled this whole entire fight. And Kelvin Gastelum's a tough fight for everybody. So not only to control this fight, but also have the advantages on the ground, that is very impressive by Robert Whittaker, because Kelvin is a great wrestler. So the things that really stood out to me for Robert Whittaker's performance in this fight were his striking, yes, the wrestling, yes, but more specifically in the striking realm, we saw him. He always has great combos. He throws that 1-2 with a head kick, or sometimes it's just a 1, then a head kick. Sometimes it's just a 2, then a head kick. But he throws that combo very well, and he gets opponents leaning into that head kick. He did land that in the second round, or was it the first round? It was early in the fight. He landed that head kick on Kelvin Gastelum and almost put him away earlier, but Kelvin Gastelum did have the durability to hold through all 5 rounds, which was very impressive because Robert Whittaker looked great. And Rob did a great job of striking from weird angles and weird times. Rob will attempt strikes from angles and positions that most guys don't, and it catches his opponents off guard. I think that can be seen. He threw a head kick, and then he followed with a left hook. In one of those exchanges. So most guys don't follow with that left hook after a head kick, and he threw that left hook afterwards and landed cleanly. So his use of angles and his use of unorthodox timing really allows him to find many openings on the feet to land strikes, and I think that is the most impressive aspect of his striking abilities. Like I said, he mixed in the ground game so well that in this next fight against Izzy, which we are going to be seeing that fight, I'm quite sure, everyone is pretty much in agreement that Whittaker has deserved that title shot and has earned it. So in that next fight with Izzy, that balanced attack is going to be crucial to winning that fight, because we saw what he did in the last fight didn't work. He didn't win that fight, and it was a close back and forth for a minute of that fight, for a little bit of that fight, and then Izzy eventually pulled the head in the end of the first round and eventually won in the second round. But I think that Robert Whittaker can make this a far more compelling, interesting, competitive fight by using a more balanced approach than he did in the first fight. And I think that's something that we'll see in the second fight. And I don't know if I'm ready to predict that Whittaker can go out and win that fight, but I think that he has shown that it's going to be a much better fight, and he does have a chance. I wouldn't count Whittaker out of that rematch, but we're going to discuss that more in depth, obviously, when that comes around. There's no sense in getting too far ahead of ourselves right now. But I think it's pretty clear that Whittaker earned that shot. I mean, he beats Till, Cannonier, and Gastelum after being the champ before that. So that's if you look at that rankings wise, that's like in the rankings that would be 4, 6, and 8. That's a pretty impressive. The only other person that you could make a case for is Marvin Vettori, and Marvin Vettori has wins against 7 and 12 in the rankings. So, in all honesty, this has to go to Whittaker. And I think Vettori realized that. He was there, and he pretty much succeed. He pretty much, just accepted the fact that that title shot was going to go to Whittaker. I think that could have been an interesting situation if Gastelum would have won, and that would have created a mess in the division because we'd be in a situation where Kelvin would have beat Rob would have beat Till, and everyone would have had a win against each other, and it would have been a mess. But with Whittaker winning this fight, we have a clear number one contender, which is great for Izzy, and I think that fight will be booked soon. And for Gastelum, I think the right step for Gastelum is the winner of Uriah Hall versus Chris Weidman. That's going to be taking place on Saturday. Usually I'm not big on matching winners with losers. Usually you want to go winner-winner or loser-loser. But in this situation, I think we can make an exception. I think Gastelum needs to stay in the top 10, 12 range of that 185-pound division. I think he's one of those top guys. And I think really going down any further than that, it would be risky because I think Kelvin would be able to get a pretty big win there. And I think Kelvin is back. I mean, he didn't look too bad in this fight, despite the fact that this was a situation where Kelvin didn't look bad. Rob just looked so good. I don't think there's anything major negative that we saw from Kelvin. This wasn't a performance like Kevin Holland where we were critiquing his wrestling after the fact. This was a situation where we were praising Rob, and I think that just shows how talented Kelvin is as a fighter, and I think we should keep him in there with some of those talented guys. So I think the winner of Uriah Hall versus Chris Weidman would be a good next step for both guys that would be taking that fight. And now, since we had the answer, this fight here, Whittaker versus Gastelum, it always raised questions as to what was happening in the 185-pound division. Last week, we had, I was kind of throwing around a lot of ifs and buts. It's hard to matchmake with the number one guy being booked to fight. Now that we have the answer with Robert Whittaker winning, we can book some of these other guys in fights here. So we have Robert Whittaker, obviously. I said that he should fight Izzy next, and I think everyone's in agreement on that. And then moving down, we have Paulo. And I think the next logical fight for Paulo is Marvin Vettori. I think that Vettori has done good work, and he has proven that he deserves a big opportunity, whether that's obviously not going to be a title shot because that goes to Rob, but I think that he has shown that he deserves a big opportunity in this division, and I think that Paulo Costa fight is going to be that big opportunity for him. And then that would also, for Paulo, that would also, get him back on track to having a title shot if he wins that after this Whittaker fight, Whittaker versus Israel. And then we have Jared Cannonier, who I think they should match him up with Darren Till. I mean, Till is out with a broken collarbone. Cannonier has been out with a broken arm. So I think once we get both of these guys fully healthy, I think this would be a good return fight for both of them. Put the guy coming off an injury, match them both up against each other. That way, you don't have any, it's kind of both of these guys have taken time off. I don't know if their timetable for return is going to, work out that perfectly for them to fight each other. But if it does work out that way and we can have Till versus Cannonier, I think that would be a great fight for both of them. And then that would put them maybe one win away from a title shot. And I know that Izzy wants to fight both of those guys. He did call out Jared Cannonier, and then Cannonier lost to Whittaker. Till lost to Whittaker as well. So Izzy wants to fight both those guys. He was interested in both those guys. Getting them up against each other guarantees you a win for someone that can be very marketable as a new, fresh face to fight Izzy. So that's good. The only guy that the situation kind of screws over a little bit is Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson, if something happens where Cannonier is ready to return a lot sooner than Till, then you could put Cannonier in there with Brunson. I think that would make sense, and that would be a good fight for both of them as well. But like I said, that would be a second option if it takes Till a lot longer to return than Cannonier, which is a possibility considering the fact that Cannonier broke his arm last year and Till just broke his collarbone a couple weeks ago. Obviously, you can't be too sure with injuries and how those heal. But if not, I'd also like Brunson versus Hermansson would be a really fun match in my opinion. And I think that would be a good match to make if Brunson can go out, or if Hermansson can go out there and beat Edmund Shabazian. That fight's coming up here in a month and a half, 2 months in that range. So if Shabazian can go out there and get if Hermansson can go out there and beat Shabazian, I think that would be the fight to make for Brunson, and I think that would be an interesting fight. That's all the matchmaking for 185, and there really wasn't much that happened on this card other than the main event. We had some interesting fights. We had Andrei Arlovsky got a good win, a couple other things. But the big thing that stood out to me on the main card outside of the main event was Tracy Cortez. Cortez is being hyped as a very strong prospect here in the female 115-pound division, and I think that she showed both potential and weaknesses. She didn't look great on the feet. She got leg kicked a decent amount, and it looked like her leg wasn't that stable at the end of the fight. I'm sure that was just like a nerve and swelling type deal, and I don't think it's any permanent damage. But she did absorb a lot of leg kicks, and she got touched up a couple times. Her opponent landed a big right hand there. So there were some holes in her striking, but her grappling looked very good. On the ground, she had a lot of ground control in the first round, and she wasn't just laying and praying. She landed some very good strikes. She eventually got into a body triangle, was attacking a rear naked choke. She obviously didn't get the rear naked choke, but we saw her advanced positions, land ground and pound, did very good things on the ground, and she's a very, very good grappler. So I'm excited to see what Tracy Cortez can do in the future. I don't want her to be rushed too fast because she does have obvious holes on the feet. And if someone has really good takedown defense and is a good striker, they can win that match. But I think that Cortez has a lot of room to grow. I don't think she's even close to peaked. And that's the word I used earlier was potential, and she definitely has potential. Anyone with the strong wrestling base, if you can flush out the striking aspect of the game, you have potential to be very good in MMA. And Cortez has half of that equation figured out. So if she can figure out the other half, then like Mackenzie Dern did, Mackenzie Dern obviously doesn't have that elite level striking, but her striking is more than passable at an MMA level, considering her jiu-jitsu. So if Tracy Cortez can go out there and get some good striking and take a similar career path as Mackenzie Dern, then she has a lot of potential. Like I said, don't rush her. She doesn't need someone in the top 15 right now. Give her another unranked name, and we'll see how she progresses here throughout the rest of the year. Like I said, there wasn't much to talk about on this Fight Night card. It just wasn't the best card. We had it was a light card, and then we had the co-main get canceled. In that, it's hard to say what should happen. If you aren't aware, Jeremy Stevens pushed Drakkar Klose at the weigh-ins, and he basically got whiplash from the push and could not fight. A lot of people are saying, Drakkar Klose was faking it. That doesn't make sense to me. Drakkar Klose, this was also another important note in this situation, was it was directly after weigh-ins. So, Jakar Close is they're dehydrated, and he hasn't yet rehydrated, so that makes you more vulnerable to injuries at that time. So, that would aggravate an injury much worse being in that state rather than being fully hydrated. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And I think they need to reschedule that fight ASAP. That's a nice fight that needs to happen. It doesn't sound like Jakar Close, got any significant damage, but I think this should be a lesson that let's not get in scraps at weigh-ins. It's a face-off and they got in each other's face and then Jeremy pushes him. You don't have to do that. You're going to fight him the next day. You push him on Friday. Don't push him on Friday and fight him on Saturday. Instead, you pushed him on Friday and we didn't get the fight on Saturday. So I think this is just one of those things where we need to be more careful. And I'm not trying to single out Jeremy because plenty of guys have, shoved their opponents in the past, and we haven't seen something like this as of recently. I'm sure it's happened before in MMA, but this is the only time it's happened within the last 2 years or so, and this was a co-main event with a very good headliner. So getting this co-main scrapped really hurt the card, and I think that's just something that we should try and stop moving forward. I don't think Jeremy should be fined. He essentially got fined because he didn't get to fight, so he didn't get his show money. I doubt he got his show money. He didn't get the opportunity to get his win money. He didn't get the opportunity for a fight of the night bonus. So I think that's enough punishment, is just not having the opportunities. You got that taken away from you. I think that is enough of a punishment. So don't punish Jeremy. We should use this as a lesson to other fighters is, hey, keep it cool till you step in the ring. Just something to think about. And then the other piece of big news was Ben Askren versus Jake Paul. If you didn't see, Jake Paul won via knockout in the first round. He faked a jab to the body and then landed a big overhand right, put Ben down. I'm not going to get too in-depth in this fight because we have people debating the stoppage. We have people saying, was it fixed? I mean, I'm not going to throw around conspiracy theories here. I don't feel like Ben Askren would be the type of guy to, throw a fight. That doesn't seem like something Ben Askren would do. And I'm not going to debate if it was an early stoppage, and that's because I don't watch boxing like that. If this was an MMA fight and it was an early stoppage, I'd give you my opinion. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm some boxing expert. This is an MMA podcast, not a combat sports podcast, MMA podcast. So I'm only going to talk about what I know because it's not fair to you guys for me to just come on here and talk reckless about boxing when I have, baseline. My boxing knowledge has come through the sport of MMA. So take that with what you will. I'm not going to sit here and talk about boxing. One thing that I do think is we need to stop having MMA fighters go into a boxing ring and box. If you want to fight an MMA fighter, come into MMA and fight him. If you want to box someone, box a boxer in a boxing ring. If you want to fight someone in an MMA fight, have an MMA fighter fight an MMA fighter in an octagon. That's just all I have to say on that. And an interesting note here is Jake Paul is one of the biggest pay-per-view draws in combat sports right now, whether you like it or not. Whether he deserves it or not, he is. And here's how I judge this, is because many of my friends know that I am a big combat sports fan. So when I have people reach out to me on a fight, that's when I have casual friends reach out to me on a fight. I have other friends that do like MMA, and they ask me about fights, and I talk to them about fights, and they're in the know of MMA. I'd consider them hardcore fans, but I have casual fans as well that I know, and I can tell you how big a fight is going to be by how interested those people are that are kind of outside of the ring of combat sports. This year, I've had 2 instances where people outside of the combat sports community have come to me and asked me about a fight. First fight, Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier, asking me about Conor. Then this fight, I've had a couple of people ask me about the Jake Paul versus Ben Askren fight. That's how I know when I can judge a fight. The Izzy fight was not at the same level in terms of pay-per-view, in my opinion. We had some casual interest, not a lot, but Jake Paul gets more casual interest than probably any fighter, or not any fighter, any fighter other than Conor McGregor. As of right now, it looks like that fight on Saturday is going to be bigger than next week's three title fights headlined by Usman versus Masvidal, and Masvidal is this supposedly, guy who the casuals look at as a big pay-per-view star. And by the way, I'm not saying that Jake Paul deserves this or that he's earned this. I'm just telling you what is, from my knowledge, in terms of pay-per-view draw. It looks like Jake Paul is the biggest draw right now that's not named Conor McGregor. Now, what is next for Jake Paul? I'm not going to sit here and speculate too much. Give him someone who knows how to box. Don't put him in there with an amateur boxer, actually would be great. I think Ben Askren is less than amateur level boxing, and that's not saying that as a dig on Askren. I think Askren would agree with me on that, and I love Ben, so I'm not sitting here trying to trash Ben. That's not what I'm doing. But Ben is famous because of his wrestling abilities, not his boxing abilities. So that's all you need to know about his boxing abilities. Put him in there. Put Jake Paul in there with someone that knows how to box and is a good boxer. And then if he can beat them, he will have the respect that he wants from the boxing community. Go beat someone who knows how to box, and we'll give you the respect you want if you can beat a real boxer. So I'm from here on out, just a disclaimer, I'm not going to talk about Jake Paul again until a fight is signed, and only if it's against another MMA fighter. I'll talk about it briefly. This is the most you're going to hear me talk about Jake Paul for a long time. I'm not going to bring you the news when, hey, so-and-so called out Jake Paul, because there's going to be loads of MMA fighters who are calling out Jake Paul. We've seen it already. There's 150 MMA fighters raising their hands saying, "Ooh, I'll fight Jake Paul." Of course you will. Everyone knows. Majority of big-time fighters will take that fight against Jake Paul because they're so incredibly confident they can win, and it's an easy payday, and I don't blame them. But I'm not going to sit here and report to you as to who wants to fight Jake Paul next. You can find that on Twitter. I'm not going to sit here and talk about it because at the end of the day, until something is signed and announced, it doesn't matter. Because last time building up to this fight, Jake was supposed to, fight Dylan Dennis. Then there were big talks about him fighting Michael Bisping. Then Ben Askren's name got thrown in the mix. Then someone else got thrown in the mix. Uriah Hall was talking about it on Twitter. So I'm not going to sit here and break down every time someone wants to fight Jake Paul. But when it's signed, I'll talk about it. And then when it happens, I'll maybe talk about it. So just a disclaimer there. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about this week was UFC 261. Big fight card headlined by Masvidal versus Usman. In this fight, I'm taking Usman. I think that Usman has only improved since their first fight, and I think it's going to be more competitive than the first fight, but I think the improvements we've seen from Kamaru on the feet, combined with the fact that he's going to have a large advantage in the clinch like he did last time, and he can get takedowns. I don't think he got very many takedowns in the first fight, but if he was in the first fight, he was content with staying in the clinch because Masvidal couldn't get his back off the cage. So I think if Masvidal can get his back off the cage a little bit, we're going to see some more takedown attempts. But Kamaru is a far improved striker. I think that Jorge still has the advantages on the feet, but Kamaru is far improved and will be able to hang with Jorge a lot more on the feet. So I still think Kamaru wins. I think Kamaru is going to get a unanimous decision victory, relatively dominant. So that's my prediction on that fight. And I don't think there is too much to see here. Not a lot of MMA fans that I've seen are too excited for this matchup. I think Leon's a more compelling matchup with Usman. I think Colby's a more compelling matchup with Usman. Wonderboy, to an extent, is a more compelling matchup than for Usman. So, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens here. Like I said, I've got Usman by unanimous decision, and hopefully he stays active because there is a line of challengers looking to fight Kamaru Usman at 170 pounds. The co-main event is Weili Zhang versus Rose Namajunas. Don't know why it took me so long to think of Rose Namajunas, but yes, we have Weili Zhang versus Rose Namajunas. This fight for me is going to be the closest fight out of the 3 title fights that we're seeing on this card. This one, right now, I'm leaning Weili, but Rose does have a legit chance here. In my opinion, this is a toss-up 50-50 right now in who I'm going to pick, and I'm leaning Weili. I'm going to watch more tape on this throughout the week, and I'll have a more educated prediction later in the week. But right now, I'm leaning Weili. I think she has more power in her hands, and she's a very, very good technical striker with good grappling. But like I said, I'm gonna watch some tape, and I might switch up on that prediction. I'll plug the TikTok once again. Go to the TikTok at HeadkickKO Podcast, because on Thursday I'll be posting my official prediction for Shevchenko versus Andrade. Friday will be Weili versus Rose, and Saturday you'll see the prediction for Usman versus Masvidal. You're seeing a little look ahead here, but I go more in depth in the 1 minute TikTok, a little bit more in depth in the X's and O's department of the fight. Okay, and the last title fight, Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Andrade. I've got Valentina in this one. Once again, I think it's going to be relatively dominant, and I think that Valentina is going to get a unanimous decision here. Valentina is, in my opinion, the second best female fighter in the world, behind only Amanda Nunes. And I think that on the feet, Shevchenko is going to have a big advantage here. I think that Valentina is so technically strong that she's going to be able to utilize the size disadvantage in this fight and come out on top. Andrade is powerful. She does have a chance. She's got very good power for females. So especially at female 125, she might be the hardest hitter. Valentina does have knockout power as well. We saw her knock out Jessica I with a head kick. Shout out. Hopefully Valentina gets another head kick. We've been on a streak here, and we haven't seen a head kick KO in a minute. So if Valentina can go out there and get another head kick KO and get one against Jessica Andrade, that'd make my day. Scratch that. If we can get a head kick KO, that'd be awesome. If we get a head kick KO on Saturday, I'll Venmo someone $15 or something if we get a head kick KO. If we get a head kick KO, if you're watching right now, if you comment your Venmo on the YouTube, I'll Venmo you $15 if we get a head kick KO on Saturday. So drop your Venmo in the comments, but you have to be subscribed. Subscribe, drop the Venmo in the comments. We get a head kick KO. $15 to the top comment with their Venmo. Like I said, you have to be subscribed. Didn't plan on doing that, but you know what? Let's spice it up. Like I said, didn't plan on that, but might as well. We have a couple other big fights on this card. Chris Weidman versus Uriah Hall. This fight has been long in the making since this is actually the rematch. They fought once before. They were both in the UFC. This is interesting to me. This is like your classic grappler versus striker matchup. I'm leaning Uriah Hall in this. I think that he has this fight's such a toss-up but I'm leaning Uriah Hall. My gut is telling me Uriah Hall hey, maybe Uriah Hall will be the one to get that head kick KO. You never know. Yeah. So I'm leaning Uriah Hall. I think he's going to be able to control the fight while it's on the feet and do some damage on the feet. And we'll see if he can stop a Chris Weidman takedown. If he can't stop a Chris Weidman takedown, it's going to be a long night for him. But I think he will be able to stop enough takedowns to win this fight. The last big fight on this card is Anthony Smith versus Jimmy Crute. Well, I shouldn't say the last big fight. The last fight on the main card is Anthony Smith versus Jimmy Crute. This is the first big test we're going to see. I shouldn't say the first big test. Another big test for Jimmy Crute. He is a top prospect in the UFC. Most people look at him as the brightest prospect at the 215 or 205 pound weight class. Is that my opinion? Maybe. I think he might be the best prospect at light heavyweight. He might not be. I lean Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill is from Michigan. I'm from Michigan. So if I had to put a name on the top prospect at 205 pounds, give me Jamal Hill. But Jimmy Crute is still very young, very promising. So I'll give him number 2 slot. I can't switch up on Jamal Hill. So we'll give Jimmy Crute number 2, riding with my guy Jamal Hill until someone can prove otherwise. But I think Jimmy Crute is this is a tough one to call because we have Anthony Smith with so much experience and so much skill versus Jimmy Crute, the up and comer. This is another toss up. This main card is great because there's the two fights that aren't title fights are two very interesting fights that I think are going to be really close. I'm leaning towards Jimmy Crute here. But by no means would I be surprised if Anthony Smith goes out there and gets a win. But if I was forced to bet, I'm putting money on Jimmy Crute. If I was forced to bet. That's just my instinct. And I think that Jimmy is very talented and will surprise some people here in the future. The other notable fights on this card, we have Cowboy Oliveira, a longtime UFC fighter, versus Randy Brown. That should be a fun one. Carl Roberson, Tristan Connolly, Pat Sabanti. We have some fun fights. Kevin Navidad. I think we're gonna have some potential for some fun fights here. Out on the prelims. But the main card is a very strong main card, and hopefully the prelims are fun. That's all you can really expect from prelims that don't have top prospects on them. There's different types of prelim fights. There's the fights that you want to be fun fights, and I think we have a lot of those fun fights. And there's other prelims fights that have top prospects with big potential. I think this is the first section where we should see a lot of fun prelim fights, and I'm hoping that's what we get. We've been going for 30 minutes, so that's pretty long. I'm happy about that, considering we didn't have too much to talk about here. But, like I said, if you're watching on YouTube, comment your Venmo and subscribe if you want to be a part of the little head kick KO $15 Venmo contest type dealio. And make sure you go to my Twitter, which is HeadKickKO Follow me on there, interact with me there, ask me questions. If you have a good question, I will put it on the pod and I'll answer it here. If it's just a quick question, I will answer it on Twitter. Follow me on TikTok for a mix of content. It's a lot of fight predictions, and I do some other things like initial reactions, things like that. A lot of good content over on the TikTok, like I said. And wherever you are watching, thank you for watching. And we will be back next week with another episode of the Head Kick KO podcast.